So, have you ever really stopped to think about what human rights are? I mean, are they just this nice, fuzzy idea that we all sort of agree on? Or do they have actual, real world legal power? Well, today, we're going to trace the incredible journey of human rights, all the way from a philosophical spark to a complex global system of law. Let's get into it.
And this, right here, is the big question we're going to explore. Is it just an idea, or is it law? By the end of this, you're going to see that the answer isn't a simple yes or no. It's complicated.
All right, here's our game plan. We'll start with the basics. What are we even talking about? Then we'll look at the historical moment that forged the modern system. We'll break down the different kinds of rights, see how they were turned into actual law, and finally, we'll tackle the really tough question: how do you enforce them?
Okay, let's start at square one. To really get what human rights law is all about, we have to understand the core concept itself, and, more importantly, how that concept is changed over time.
You know, the dictionary definition seems pretty straightforward, right? A right that belongs to every person. But all the power, all the controversy, and all the complexity is wrapped up in that one little word: every. Now this is a game changer. The old idea, the rights of man, was basically that your rights were a gift from your government. They were tied to your citizenship. If you were a citizen, you got rights. But look at the modern idea. Universal human rights are inherent. You have them just because you're human. The state doesn't give them to you, and it can't take them away. That is a massive revolutionary shift in thinking.
So, what could possibly cause such a huge change in how we view rights? Well, tragically, it took the single worst catastrophe in human history. The absolute horror of World War II made the world realize that leaving rights in the hands of individual states just wasn't going to cut it anymore.
And you can see it happen right here on this timeline. In the ashes of the war, the world scrambled to build something better. First, in 1945, you get the UN Charter, which basically says, hey, protecting human rights is one of our main jobs now. But then, just 3 years later, they created the actual blueprint for what those rights are, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR.
And make no mistake, this wasn't just some afterthought for the UN. It was woven into its DNA from the very beginning. This quote from the Charter's preamble says it all. This was about reaffirming faith in human dignity itself.
And this is where that idea of universality just hits you like a ton of bricks. The UDHR makes it crystal clear. These rights are for everyone, period. It doesn't matter what your race, sex, or religion is, or where you're from. For its time, this was an absolutely radical statement to make on the world stage.
Okay, so human rights is obviously a massive topic. To help make sense of it all, people often talk about them in 3 generations. Now, this isn't to say one is more important than another, it's more about how the ideas developed over time.
So, the first generation is what you might call the classic liberties. Think freedom of speech, the right to a fair trial. These are all about protecting you from the state stepping on your toes. Then you have the second generation, which is about what the state should actually do for you, like providing access to work or an education. And finally, the third generation is a bit newer and broader, focusing on rights that belong to whole groups of people, like the right to a clean environment.
So we have the UDHR, this incredible aspirational document. But here's the catch. It was a declaration. It was a statement of principles, not a law book. So the next absolutely crucial step was to take that beautiful idea and forge it into cold, hard, legally binding law.
And this is the key difference. When a country signs and ratifies a treaty, like the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, they're not just saying, yeah, we agree with this. They're making a legal promise to the entire world that they will make these rights a reality for their own people. It's a binding contract.
And wow, has the system grown. This is just a tiny sample. You've got treaties covering everything from the rights of women and children to conventions specifically outlawing torture. It's become this huge, sprawling web of international law.
All right, this brings us to the most difficult part of the entire story. It's great to have all these laws on the books, but how in the world do you actually make sure countries follow them? This is where the noble idea of human rights slams into the messy, complicated reality of global politics.
But first, let's just pause and appreciate the single biggest achievement of this whole system. Before human rights law, what a government did to its own people was nobody else's business. It was protected by state sovereignty. This system pierced that veil. For the first time ever, the international community could legally say, no, what you're doing to your own citizens is wrong, and we can hold you accountable for it. That is huge. And this is the promise.
right? The ultimate goal is to take all those words written in treaties and make them a real, lived experience for people, to ensure justice and equality aren't just fancy words, but something everyone can count on.
But, and it's a big but, we have to be honest about the challenges. Actually protecting a specific person from abuse is incredibly hard. There's no global police force to swoop in. Many states, frankly, don't like being told what to do, and there are still very real debates about whether these rights are truly universal or if they're just a Western concept being pushed on other cultures.
But it's not all doom and gloom. There are working models that show us what's possible when there's real commitment, and probably the best example on the planet is the European Court of Human Rights. It's widely seen as the most effective system out there.
So what's their secret sauce? Well, a few key things. First, individuals, actual people, can take their own government to court. And most importantly, when the court makes a decision, it's final and legally binding. The country has to comply. It's a system with real teeth, and it's a powerful example of what human rights law can be.
Which brings us all the way back to the beginning. Given how hard it is to enforce these laws and all the political debates around them, some people argue that the whole idea is flawed. They say human rights have no place in international law. After seeing this whole journey, from the hopeful aftermath of WW2 to the messy realities of today, what do you think? Is a flawed, imperfect system of human rights protection better than having no system at all?